Good morning, and welcome to worship this morning. My name is Adam Hildebrand. I get to be one of the pastors here at LVfirst. It's so exciting to be with all of you on this first Sunday of Advent as we begin this journey towards Christmas, which I know some of you started many months ago. I don't know how many of you are like advanced planners. You started shopping a long time ago, and you got all the stuff ready, and you're ready to go, and you put up the decorations as soon as November hit. And some of us are those people, some of us are not, and that's okay. Wherever you're at on that, we're beginning this journey together, moving towards Christmas, and we're excited to do it together. And so if you're here this morning for the first time, let me just extend a special welcome to you. So glad you're here, so glad you're a part of service this morning, whether you're joining us here in person or online. We'd love to get to know you. We'd love to hear a little bit of your story and have a chance to share a little bit of ours, who we are and what we're all about here at LVfirst. Because we got a lot of things going on, a lot of ways that, as you heard earlier, we're trying to connect the church to the community to the church. So many things coming up, so many opportunities to be a part of serving our community in special ways. Can't wait for Lawrenceville Lights and 15,000 of our closest friends coming out to drive through the campground and see those lights. And so need lots and lots of help as the weeks are coming up. As you came in, you may have seen some little angels on the wall. Those are opportunities for us to serve kids in our community who might not have Christmas without us. And so I want to encourage you to take a look at that. That's through Village of Hope and Christmas Extravaganza, which also happens later this month. And there's more information about that on that QR code on our link tree, and would love for you to get involved in that as well. Well, it is the most wonderful time of the year, right? Okay, for 4 of you, good. So we're all starting on the same page. Like the song tells us, it's the most wonderful time of the year. That song that plays on repeat everywhere, all the places that we go, and on the radio station for 24 hours a day for the next 25 days or so. The most wonderful time of the year. It's supposed to be the happiest, most exciting season that we have together. And we look forward to the Christmas season so much that it begins to kind of encroach on other holidays. Like pretty soon, Cracker Barrel is going to have out Christmas decorations on July 4th, and we'll just start then and just go all the way through. But what's interesting is, as we think about this being the happiest season of all, the season of expectation, of excitement, of joy, of celebration, what we find is that statistics don't necessarily bear that out. That maybe Christmas is not the happiest season of all for everyone. In fact, if we look at some of the statistics from the American Psychological Association, what you find is that 38% of people say that their stress increases during the holiday season. Another survey found that 74% of Americans say Christmas provides stress, and 55% say it's the most stressful holiday. I'm wondering about what the other 45% say is the most stressful holiday. Like, do people get really stressed at Labor Day? I don't know. I don't know what it is. Depression increases. The National Alliance on Mental Illness survey found that 64% of people with a mental illness feel their conditions worsen around the holidays. And research shows that seasonal depression affects about 6% of the population. Holiday anxiety can involve illogical thoughts and spiral out of control into other things. Substance abuse increases during the holiday season and can increase substance misuse. And 66% of people have experienced loneliness during the holiday season. There's this loneliness epidemic that the Surgeon General keeps talking about, and it gets worse during the holiday season. 68% of people have experienced financial strain during the holidays. Can I get an amen? And 63% of people have experienced too much pressure or unrealistic expectations during the holidays. We often put so much pressure on ourselves to have this perfect holiday, this perfect Christmas. And so with all of this in mind, over the next few weeks, we wanted to think about the ways that we could tune our hearts and our minds to the real purpose of this season. To think about what it is that might adorn our minds with these ornamental things that can allow us to walk through this season of celebration, experiencing all of the different emotions that we might have, but also have the mentalities to allow us to keep those emotions in the right framing. See, emotions, kind of like your in-laws who came for Thanksgiving, they're guests, and we get to decide how long they stay with what we tend to focus on. When we focus on our emotions, when we focus on which emotions we're dealing with, we get to decide how long we hold on to those things. We get to decide what we do with those emotions. They can come and go, or they can stay, depending on how we deal with them and the mentalities that we bring to those realities. And for a lot of people, a lot of the time, we make the Christmas story like so neat and tidy that it doesn't necessarily feel real. It doesn't feel like it speaks to our lived experience oftentimes. But the story of Christmas is located in the real world. The way that the gospel writers tell us this story tells us a lot about how we live and what we do right here and right now, the way that we experience the world around us. A place where, the Christmas trees aren't quite as straight or as tall or as full as we want them to be. Where we go to Home Depot to buy our Christmas tree and we can't believe the price tag on this tree. Where the corners of the wrapping paper won't fold exactly right, and so you get that big bumpy thing on the side and you just can't figure out how to tape it down enough to make it look right. Where the kids don't behave and things don't seem to meet our expectations of the season. All of these things, all of these expectations, all of these hopes, all these struggles, all of the pressure that we put on this season can lead us to disappointment and to despair and to hopelessness, which is antithetical to what the season is really supposed to invite us into. The Gospel of Luke doesn't begin at the manger. It doesn't begin with baby Jesus. It doesn't begin, in the kind of the Christmas story as we think about it. There's a little bit of story before the story. It's the background that helps us to understand the foreground of the story of Jesus' birth. In Luke chapter 1, the story of Jesus really starts with the story of a different baby being born. His cousin, John the Baptist. In verse 5 of the first chapter of Luke, it says this: "In the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. His wife was a descendant of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations of the Lord. But they had no children, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years." Now, Luke demands that we locate the story of Christmas, that we locate the story of the Gospels, that we locate the good news in the context of the real world. King Herod should be a marker to all of us to remind us that Israel is an occupied land, that there are subjugated people. And into that context, he introduces these two people, Zechariah and Elizabeth. And things just aren't the way that they want them to be. Now, Zechariah and Elizabeth are good folks. They haven't done anything wrong. They've followed all the rules. They've kept all the laws. In fact, we find out that Zechariah is a priest and that Elizabeth is a descendant of Aaron. Like, these are good folks in this community. Like, everybody would look at them and go, like, hey, those are good people. They got it together. Their house looks like nicely trimmed. It's got, all the stuff up. They hung up their lights, and it's not overwhelming, but it's nice. Got little candles in the windows and the wreaths and everything. They decorate all the way that they're supposed to. They do all the right things. They say all the right stuff. They've got that Advent calendar with the chocolate candies in it, and they go day by day instead of eating all of them in one day. I see that we have some one-day eaters in here. They did all the right things, and yet their life wasn't exactly what they expected. Their life wasn't exactly what they thought it would be. We get this from that verse 7, that they had no children because Elizabeth was barren. And in this culture, they had this belief, this way of seeing people. The common belief in this day that childlessness was a sign of divine punishment and kind of a source of shame. And now let me just pause for a moment here and tell you that we don't believe that about God. That's not how we understand what God does in the world. But for these folks, they would have looked at Elizabeth and thought that there was something wrong in her life because she hadn't had a child. And I got to imagine for them it was frustrating. That things hadn't gone the way that they had hoped. And time again, life had left them hopeless. Maybe they even got frustrated with God and they would say, why us? What's next? What more? How much can we take? We've tried to do all the right things. We've tried to live the right way. We've tried to be a good person. But here I am looked down on. Here I am lonely. Here I am not in the way that I thought it would be. And for many of us, we feel those same things. Here I am widowed. Here I am divorced. Here I am, my kids won't talk to me. Here I am, my family doesn't understand me. Here I am, I feel broken. But when our circumstances begin to define our mentality about our reality, we always tend towards despair. When what's going on around us begins to define our mentality about our reality, we always tend towards despair. Because we all have a negativity bias, right? Our tendency is to regulate or is to register negative stimuli more readily and to also dwell on these events in our lives. There's been lots of studies on this. As humans, we tend to remember traumatic experiences more so than positive ones, recall insults more than praise. So some of those things that we carry with us, some of those thoughts about ourselves are because someone has said something and we've just carried it with us for years and years and years. We tend to react more strongly to negative stimuli. We think about negative things more frequently than positive ones. PhD Nikki Puccetti said it this way. One way to think about it is that the longer your brain holds on to negative events, the unhappier people report being. Another study found that the persistence of a person's brain in holding on to a negative stimulus is what predicts more negative and less positive daily emotional experiences. That in turn predicts how well they think they're doing in their life. In other words, we often hope less because we drag our past experiences into our present reality, and they begin to define how we feel about our current circumstances as well. And this is different from anxiety. Anxiety is about the future. Despair is about bringing our past into our present. Elizabeth and Zechariah have dealt with this struggle for years and years and years. And it begins to define their worldview. Here's how the story continues. Once, when he was serving as a priest before God and his section was on duty, so in this culture, they had all these different bands of priests, and they would come and they would serve for 2 weeks a year, and then it would just kind of rotate through, and different people did different things at different times, which, I thought my job was great, 1 day a week, 1 hour, but this 2 weeks every year, it's great. He's only got to show up and do his thing for 2 weeks, then he goes home. But this is what they're doing. So while his group was on duty, he was chosen by lot. He drew the straw. He got the short straw, which meant that according to the custom of the priesthood, he got to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now, this should be like a high holy thing. But you feel the weight of the story already. You feel a little bit of Zechariah's frustration with God. And now he's got to go into the temple and do this incense offering. He's got to follow this custom. He's got to go in there. He has no expectation that he's going to encounter God. All he thinks is, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to do the smells and the bells, and everything's going to be, just like it always is. It's kind of like when I go to the mall with my wife and we got to go into the candle store. It's like the worst experience of my day. I know that it's going to happen. We're going to go into this, or we go into a small town and visit someplace, and we go into one of those nice little quaint shops, and they've got all these candles, and she's like, oh, here, smell this. Here, smell this. I don't know what sandalwood is supposed to smell like. I don't know how many things they can combine into one scent, one candle, but all I know is that my nose freaks out, and I've got a headache the rest of the day, and like even walking to the front door, I'm filled with expectations about this experience because of my past experiences, and I know this isn't going to go well, and I'm not going to be happy, my eyes are going to water. It's like the whole deal. I imagine that's how Zechariah felt going into the temple of God to offer this incense offering. Now, at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people were praying outside. All the other priests were outside praying, and then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing at the right side of the altar of incense. Zechariah didn't expect to encounter God. He didn't expect to encounter anything other than what normally happens, what his past experiences tell him would happen. He had no hope that anything different would come along. And many of us come into this season with a sense of duty. Like these are the things that we have to do. We just want to endure it. We don't hope to encounter God in a new way during this season. We don't expect that this Advent is going to be different than any other Advent. We don't hope to experience God during this season. Zechariah saw him, and he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel of the Lord said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard." He's like, well, which one? Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. But he must never drink wine or strong drink. Even before his birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit, and he will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. With the spirit of power of Elijah, he will go before him, that's before Jesus, to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And Zechariah said, "This is great news." That's not what Zechariah said, because Zechariah was consumed with his experiences. He had been disappointed time and time and time and time again. So all he had was despair. His response to something incredibly hopeful, this announcement from an angel, was despair. Zechariah said to the angel, "How am I going to know that this is so? Because I'm an old man, and by the way, my wife is getting on in years," which is always something nice to say about your bride. Zechariah responds out of his own doubt, his own disappointment, his own despair. He's not hopeful. He's hopeless. Because his mind is telling him, you know what, I've been down this road before. I've had high expectations. I've hoped for something. I've hoped that God was going to show up in some unique way. I've hoped and hoped and hoped, and my hoper is broken. Hoper is broken. And for a lot of us, because we've been disappointed, because some past experience has shaped our present reality, we struggle to hope anymore. And we think this year will be just like the last year, which was just like the last year, and our family's going to get together, and we're going to have a fight, and we're going to have an argument about something stupid, and then everybody's going to go away angry, and somebody's going to throw a present at somebody else, and the tree's going to fall over, and we're not going to have the right tree, and like all of these things that we go through in our mind that have happened before. Just in our house? Not in yours? All of these things that we've experienced, we drag into our present reality. And they begin to define our expectations, our hope for what might be. We think things will go terribly wrong. But maybe not. Maybe there is hope. Zechariah lacked hope. And the angel of the Lord replied to him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, because you didn't have hope, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak until the day these things occur. Which, as a dad of 3 kids, I can understand how a dad could be a little bit overwhelmed and not be able to talk when he finds out his wife's going to be pregnant. I remember when Michelle told me that we were having Caleb, for days I didn't know what to say. I was just overwhelmed. This is a different kind of mute. This is like mute. And so I love the way the story goes on. Again, this is located in real places, in real time. There's real experiences that all of us have. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering what his delay was in the sanctuary. And when he did come out, he could not speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the sanctuary. But he kept motioning to them and remained unable to speak. So, do you picture this? Zechariah comes out of the temple having encountered an angel of the Lord, and he can't talk. So he's doing charades with the people. He's motioning I saw an angel. Told me that my wife is pregnant. And they're like, what, you have food poisoning? What nobody knew what he was talking about. When the time of his service had ended, he went to his home. And after those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived. And for 5 months she remained in seclusion, but she said this is what the Lord has done for me, when he looked favorably on me and took away the disgrace, all of those things, all of those experiences that I've brought into my presence, all of the disgrace that I have endured among my people. This is what the Lord has done for me. What a word of hope. See, here's my working definition of hope from the Scriptures. It's the expectation of coming good based on the person and promises of God. Most of us, when we think about hope, our hope is in something else. A person or a promise that will often let us down. But our hope is in the expectation of what God does, what God will do. The expectation of coming good based on the person and promise of God. It's this emotional energy that's based in the future, but is fuel for the present. I like the way Eugene Peterson talks about it. He says, hope is not about the future. Hope is about the present. Now, obviously, it has to do with the future, he says, but it's a virtue which is cultivated here and now. It fills the present with energy. It connects the two comings of Jesus so that we are now participating in them. And we're not just remembering the one and believing in the other, we're actually participating in it. It's the continuity of these two things that bring us hope. I think disappointment and despair stack in our lives. And when we focus on those disappointments and we focus on that despair, it shrinks my worldview to one thing or one situation or one experience that I overlay all over all of the others. But hope is even more powerful than that, because hope is contagious. It moves from one situation to another. The hope in this is that John is going to come and tell people about the good news of Jesus is coming. He's going to share about this other person that's coming along to save the whole world, that he's going to turn our hearts back to our children, back to God, back to the way that we should be living. It's going to invite us into a hopeful future. I got to imagine that Elizabeth's hope was contagious. And as people of hope, we can share the gift of hope. My mom was telling Michelle a story the other day that I actually had never heard before. A story from when I was growing up that, at one point after my dad left, we were struggling as a family, struggling to make ends meet. That my mom thought that we were going to lose our house at one point. And that a church, just like this church, that loved people well, showed up with a whole box full of Christmas presents for our family. And that hope is contagious. It's why I think that the work that we do at Christmas Extravaganza is so important. Because that hope is contagious. That hope is something that we can share in meaningful ways. Elizabeth speaks on behalf of all of us who have hope or want hope. This is what the Lord has done for me. He looked favorably upon me and took away the disgrace so that I'm not focused on bringing the past to bear on my present. It's not saying that the past didn't happen. It's not saying that that situation is not real. It's not saying we just don't choose to think about it or talk about it. It just chooses to see past it to a better future. When John is finally born and Zechariah gets his voice back, he gives this amazing prophecy. And at the end of it, in verse 78 and 79 of the first chapter of Luke, this is what Zechariah says: "By the tender mercy of our God, the dawn from on high will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace." I was reminded the other night about Thanksgiving a few years ago. Our family had gotten an Airbnb up in North Carolina, and so me and Michelle and the kids, we were up in North Carolina, and we're sitting outside by the fire. My kids look up, and they said, "Wow, the stars are amazing here. Why don't we have stars like this at home?" And I said, "We do have stars like this at home. You just never look up. Never look up." And sometimes we miss the light of hope because we never look up. The light is coming into the world, and the darkness cannot overcome it. And if you're here this morning and you've been sitting in darkness for too long, I've got great news. It's the news that Zechariah shared with us. It's the news of hope, that dawn will break upon us if we'll choose hope, if we'll fix our eyes on Jesus and not just on our circumstances, if we'll look to hope and see hope even when it doesn't feel possible, if we'll decide to hope, if we'll take one step from hopeless towards hopeful people. I invite you to move out of the darkness of despair towards the light of Christmas, towards the light of hope.